the San Francisco Internet Society.
Well, when I was on the last time, Barbara was the designated, and Jamila was.
Hello.
And so Jamila and I have done this.
I didn't know you were working with
Barbara Kreisman?
Oh, yeah.
She and I have been down this road. She has sat on my conference calls. God love her. She has sat through my conference calls.
Oh, I can't see her.
Good morning, everyone. I think everybody's here. Will all members of the committee please take your seat? We're going to get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to the inaugural meeting of the Advisory Committee on Diversity and Digital Empowerment. I'm Michelle Carey, and I'm Chief of the Media Bureau. I wanted to thank you for lending both your time and your expertise to this important committee. I look around the room and I see some familiar faces, and many of you I've yet to meet, but I look forward to getting to know you in the coming months. Before I turn things over to Chairman Pai and the commissioners, I wanted to first introduce to you some important players for this committee. First, I wanted to introduce Jamila Best Johnson, who's the designated federal official for this committee. And some of you may feel like you know her already. I'm sure you've spoken with her multiple times on the phone. And I also want to introduce Brenda Villanueva, who's the deputy DFO for the committee. And I think many of you already know Julia Johnson, who is our committee chair.
Yay.
And finally, Diane Sutter, who's the vice chair of the committee. Thank you, ladies, for your leadership. Without further ado, I wanted to turn it over to Chairman Pai.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right. Thank you, Michelle, for that introduction. Good morning. What a great morning it is, and happy Monday. More importantly, happy Hispanic Heritage Month, which is the month of September. A mis amigos que hablan español, espero que tienen un buen mes, y también quiero que sepan ustedes que somos juntos siempre como americanos. And that exhausts my high school Spanish, so I'm now going to return to English. But I do think that today's meeting is a fitting commemoration. You know, a few days ago, I found myself addressing the student body at my alma mater, Parsons High School, a small town in southeast Kansas. And among other things, I told them that I never anticipated having an opportunity to serve in a position like this way back when I was a student in the 1970s and 1980s. And part of the reason was because I never saw anybody who looked like me in a position like this. And that's a pretty powerful impression to leave upon a young person. As I looked around in the auditorium, I saw the faces of the students, white and black and Asian and Latino, boys and girls. And my message to them was pretty simple at the time. Never let your horizons be defined by who you happen to be, where you happen to live, or what you happen to look like. To me, at least, that is the American promise. And today, those horizons are more dependent than ever on communications and technology. This sector, the communications sector, can empower Americans in so many different ways, whether it comes to jobs or services or many other things. It's a gateway, I think, for opportunity. And that's why I think it's so important for all Americans to have a chance to participate in and benefit from this sector. And that's where the FCC comes in. On my first full day of chairman, I spoke to the Commission's fantastic staff in this very room, and I said then that my highest priority would be closing the digital divide, bringing the benefits of the digital age to all Americans, regardless of race, religion, sexual orientation, gender, or anything else. And normally that would mean that the FCC would get input from our advisory committee on diversity. I mean, after all, way back in 2009, the diversity committee identified the digital divide as a critical issue for us to think about. It called on the FCC to take, and I quote, proactive steps to close the digital divide, and it also urged us to closely analyze how its broadband policy or rulemaking proposals would impact the digital divide. But there was one problem, just a small one. When I became chairman, there was no diversity committee. The committee had not met since 2013, having been disbanded of many years before under the prior administration. And that simply didn't work for me, and I dare say it probably didn't work for many of you. So I decided to recharter the committee. And so after a 4-year hiatus, the FCC's Diversity Advisory Committee, first established by Chairman Powell back in 2003, is back for a sequel. There are a number of people that I need to thank at this point. First and foremost, thanks to our fantastic and dedicated staff of the Commission's Media Bureau, the Chief Michelle Carey and all of the folks in the Media Bureau for all the work getting this committee off the ground. In particular, thanks to Jamila Bess Johnson and to Brenda Villanueva for leading this team effort. Folks on the outside might not know, or even if you do know, it's worth mentioning nonetheless that they do a tremendous amount of work above and beyond their day jobs, and I just personally want to express my appreciation for your efforts. I'd also like to thank the one and only JJ, Julia Johnson, for Dynamite. All right. Those of you who are millennials, just look it up on YouTube. You'll figure it out. But for Julia's graciously agreed to serve as the chair of this committee. She served previously as the chairwoman of this committee. And so when I say that I know she's going to do a good job, I know she's going to do a good job because she's done it before. Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for serving. Thank you all as well to Diane Sutter for agreeing to serve as our committee's vice chair. And thanks as well to those who will serve as leaders of our working groups. Heather Gate, who's the director of digital inclusion for Connected Nation. Mark Morial, the president and CEO of the National Urban League, but to me, he will forever be Mr. Mayor from New Orleans. And Henry Rivera, who is a senior advisor to the Emma Bone Foundation, a former commissioner here at the FCC, and someone who, I should add, is also a former chair of the full committee. Finally, thanks to all of you for volunteering your valuable time and to bring a laboring oar to these important issues. I know they are as important to you as they are to me. And so I'm grateful to you for bringing your talents and your dedication to bear on diversity issues and for agreeing to serve 2 years on this critical committee. But we didn't bring you here solely to pat you on the back. Well, that's part of it. We also came here to put you to work, to labor, to work alongside you. So as members of the committee, your mission is to offer guidance so that the agency can take important steps to increasing diversity throughout the communications industry and to help bring digital opportunity, as I call it, to all Americans. Now, 3 different tasks that we'd like you to focus on. One of them is going to be to identify issues that might not already be on the FCC's radar. Another will be to advise us on issues that we've already identified. For example, there's bipartisan support at the FCC for establishing an incubator program to support the entry of new and diverse voices into the broadcast industry. But there are still a lot of significant questions about what that program should look like. Who would be eligible to participate? What types of activities would qualify? What benefits would be given to existing broadcasters who agree to serve as incubators? And I hope that you'll provide some answers to these questions and perhaps come up with other recommendations on ways to foster greater diversity in broadcast ownership and management. Second task that we'll assign you is to examine how we can make sure that disadvantaged communities have more access to next generation networks. Broadband can be a great equalizer when it comes to jobs and healthcare and education and civic engagement. And I've seen it everywhere from Mission, South Dakota to Los Angeles, California. But if we don't bridge that digital divide, then I fear that communities who are on the wrong side of that divide will continue to fall behind in each of these areas. Our goal, I think, should be ubiquitous, high-speed networks that bring together all Americans. And when I say that, I do mean all Americans. Last but not least, we will ask you to take a hard look at diversity in Silicon Valley. Many sectors in our nation's communications industry have made significant strides when it comes to diversity. But the tech sector in Silicon Valley is lagging behind. For too long, women and African Americans and Latinos in particular have struggled with underemployment and a lack of promotion opportunities in the tech sector. Silicon Valley needs to do better. We hope that this committee will study the topic, highlight best practices of industry leaders in this field, and share insights with us and the public on how businesses can address these challenges. Now, clearly, as my remarks have suggested, you have a lot on your plate, so I will stop blathering now and then turn it over to the experts. But before I go, I want to thank you once again for volunteering your valuable time to serve on this important endeavor. I look forward to working with you to increasing diversity throughout the communications industry, and as I said, bringing the benefits of the digital age to all Americans, especially those who heretofore haven't enjoyed them. Thanks for your attention, and I want to thank my colleagues, Commissioners Clyburn and O'Reilly, for being here as well.
Thank you, Chairman Pai. We appreciate all that what you, all of the. You see, I'm struggling with this because he knows we have this a very friendly relationship, and I say all in small letters. But anyway,
Tough crowd.
Tough crowd. I know. Again, good morning, everyone. I really want to thank all of you and publicly thank the chairman for chartering this committee. It's critical at this stage because I can remember just over 4 years ago when the Advisory Committee on Diversity and Communications in the Digital Age held its last official meeting. To say that there have been multiple advancements in the technology space since 2013, Mr. Chairman, is an understatement. But what remains sobering is the fact that there have been too many improvements when it comes to diversity inclusion in the communications sector, which is why you are here. Now, that also includes the troubling problem of digital redlining, a practice that is dividing our communities among economic lines and preventing fast and affordable broadband from reaching those most in need. So the chartering of this new committee with a focus on diversity and digital empowerment, which includes ownership diversity and redlining, pleases me and all of those committed to its stated mission. Over the next 2 years, 31 of you will share your private sector, academic, and nonprofit world experiences to inform, encourage, and enable me and my fellow commissioners to plot a more diverse and inclusive course. The true test of your success, however, will be measured by whether those recommendations lead to action or are placed on the shelf to collect dust. Now, I, like you, am rooting for the former. Not only because I believe that this is the expectation each of you had when you applied for these positions, but because this agency and this nation desperately needs to move the ball down the field when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Allow me to quickly reiterate my call for 5 policies I believe can help move the needle when it comes to digital inclusion. We have seen how the phenomenal success of low-power FM or LPFN is playing out in local communities across this country. Non-commercial stations like Phoenix's KDIF, where I visited earlier this year in Arizona, are helping to serve and address the unique needs of local and or underrepresented groups in their communities. The first call I wish to make is for us to find ways in which to replicate and enhance the success story for more underrepresented groups that are largely minority and women who are seeking to be a part of the broadcast landscape. I urge you to think outside of the box and closely examine new ways to utilize existing frequencies to enhance such opportunities. Second, in recent years, I have called for the establishment of a pilot incubator program aimed at increasing the number of women and minority owners in the broadcast space. And I see David Honig, who has been a champion of that also. With similar calls made by my colleagues in the past, I am hopeful we can move forward with this proposal. Third, when divestitures are required during merger transactions, we should urge parties to strongly consider offers from women and minority business owners. Given the limited availability of broadcast licenses in major markets, such license transfers would enable stations to comply with the Commission's ownership rules while clearing the path for new diverse entrants. Fourth, the time to act on the Commission's independent programming NPRM is right now. With a robust record of over 36,000 filings, I believe we have enough data to move forward to a final order, targeting 2 of the worst offending practices facing many independent video programmers, unconditional most favored nation clauses, and unreasonable alternative distribution methods provisions. And lastly, with the help of Congress, we can and should reinstate a tax certificate program focused on promoting opportunities for new entrants. The quantifiable success that a familiar initiative had in the past is evident of the clear benefits that such policy would have on ownership diversity. Now, I jokingly, clumsily a little bit, because I have a little raspy voice going on, because of the wonderful and inclusive nature of this past weekend. Those of you know about the CBCF. Sometimes you start with a panel in the morning and end with a different kind of panel at night. So excuse the voice, but I had a great time. But, Mr. Chairman, I jokingly say that all with a small a. But I really meant to say all, because even though we might see things differently, different points of view, we have different backgrounds and experiences, all of us want the same thing: increased opportunities that should spread and should be ubiquitous across every sector, every economic group, every individual in this nation. This committee, all 31 of you, are very integral when it comes to this charge. So I want to say how grateful I am to you that you said yes, that you applied, that you recognized the severity and the significance of what is before you. And over the next 2 years, as we talk about, disagree sometimes, but agree on the final frontier. Okay, I'm a little tricky. But seriously, agree on the mission of diversity and inclusion. I am looking forward to the recommendations that you will have over the course of the 2 years. I am looking forward for us integrating and implementing those suggestions. And it is a pleasure for me to once again say congratulations to Julia Johnson, to all of you, and to thank the chairman publicly and privately for chartering this new course, for plotting and charting this course. And I look forward to what the next few months and years have in store. So again, thank you so very much, and good morning. And now it's my pleasure to drop the mic, to pass the mic to my colleague, Commissioner Michael O'Reilly.
I thank the chairman. I thank my good friend, Commissioner Clyburn. I'm going to be exceptionally brief and let you get to work. For those of you wondering, this haircut is what happens when you ask them to cut out the gray. But on a more serious note, I see a number of my colleagues and acquaintances that I've worked with on a number of issues: Julia, Diane, David, Nicole, many other of you that I've worked with, and look forward to meeting the rest of you. Let me extend my thanks to you for your service. I know it will take you away from your families and your real jobs, and we're grateful for your willingness to serve and the insight you'll provide. Possibly the understatement of the year, these have been quite a couple of months to discuss race, inclusion, and government policy. Do realize that we, the FCC, only have such a role in the larger discussion. We have limitations on our overall authority by the U.S. Constitution and the Communications Act. For instance, I'm not exactly sure what that third subcommittee is going to do, but I'm looking forward to seeing what it produces. We generally don't regulate their activities, and thus any problems, depending on your viewpoint, are not within our purview to fix. On that note, the last advisory committee, the one the chairman mentioned, took us down a rabbit hole on a number of subset of issues, and we're still living with the residual effects in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals as it pertains to media ownership. That was problematic. And that gets me to my larger point. I believe there may be real improvements that can be considered to our rules and practices along the charges of this advisory committee. However, I would respectfully request that you consider focusing your attention on those ideas that may actually be enacted among the members of the commission. This can either be a committee that focuses on the theoretical or one that focuses on moving the needle, as my colleague mentioned. I'm one that actually likes to make improvements in the current regulatory situation, and so I see your greatest benefit on those items that can actually change our rules in the near term. But that gets me to my last point. This is your advisory committee. The Commission is here to provide assistance to you to conduct your work and is not here to be cover for our preordained outcome. That's maybe how the last commission operated, but that's not how this commission operates. So your expertise, your viewpoints, your thoughts are what we're welcoming and appreciate in the coming months and years ahead. So I want to thank you so much for your time. I apologize that I won't be able to stay, but I will watch the proceedings from my office. I thank you so very much and look forward to your work in the coming years.
Okay, we're going to turn things now over to Jamila Best Johnson to call the meeting to order.
Good morning. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Chairman Pye. Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. Thank you, Commissioner O'Reilly. We certainly want to thank you all for taking so much time this morning to come by and to help us launch this new advisory committee. Your presence here just underscores how important you consider this charge of this very, very impressive group of experts. I want to add my hearty welcome to all of the members, particularly those who were on the previous Diversity Advisory Committee. We want to thank you for continuing to be dedicated to the principles of diversity and inclusion. And we certainly want to thank our new partners. We hope that you're going to find the work that you do here meaningful and rewarding. Please don't hesitate to reach out to FCC staff if we can support you in any way. I'd like to take a moment to thank the FCC's Office of General Counsel, and in particular, Attorney Sharon Kelly. Many of you have had to chat with Sharon in order to be cleared for your participation here according to our ethics rules. And it really was due to Sharon's tremendous efforts that we were able to clear all of you in time for this first meeting. So thank you very much to OGC. And lastly, I want to give a really, really big thank you for the coffee and bagels and other refreshments this morning to our chair, Julia Johnson, and her firm, Net Communications, for sponsoring that. And I'd like to turn it over now for brief welcome remarks from our Deputy DFO, Brenda Villanueva.
Good morning, everyone. As my DFO said, I want to also thank Chairman Pye, Commissioner Clyburn, and Commissioner O'Reilly, and everyone here for coming together on these very important, timely issues for our nation. And it is time, and I am so grateful for Chairman Pye for coming and bringing this group together, because there's a lot of work to be done, and we are here to support you. And so, as Jamila said, we're looking forward to working with all of you, and please let us know how we can help.
Thank you so much, Brenda. So without further ado, I will turn the meeting over to our chairman, Julia Johnson, to officially open the very first meeting of the Advisory Committee on Diversity and Digital Inclusion.
With that, I'd like to formally call this meeting to order. Let me start with thanking Chairman Pye for his vision and his commitment to diversity and inclusion. You started last year with a digital empowerment agenda. That was one that was core to its mission, inclusion. You've continued with the formation of several advisory councils to bring together teams of people that can make a difference in a time where inclusion and activation means more than it has ever meant before. So I thank you for that, and thank you for the opportunity to serve. Commissioner Clyburn, Commissioner O'Reilly, your comments were well said. Commissioner Clyburn, the chairman has framed this committee in such a way that we will be taking upon those kind of recommendations. And to Commissioner O'Reilly, who stated, you don't want us to just talk it, you want us to do it. Well, if you look around this table, these people are doers. They make things happen. They all have long, strong commitments to diversity and inclusion, from underserved communities to people that have lived in rural areas, also looking at what's happening in the Rust Belt. When we say all, we mean all. And the agenda that this chairman has set forth for us is one that will allow for those kind of opportunities. So it is a pleasure to serve. To those committee chairs, Mr. Mark Mariel, we salute you for your leadership in helping us with diversity in Silicon Valley. To Henry Rivera, who could not attend the meeting today because he is out of the country, but listening in and will be fully engaged in the process. And also Heather, I believe she's here with us today. There she is, Heather Gate, who will also lead an incredibly important initiative for us that will take up the issue of ubiquitous deployment and looking for ways in which we can provide the right incentives and create the right structure to make sure, Mr. Chairman, that we close this digital divide. And to all of the committee members, get ready to roll up your sleeves. We're going to kind of take it easy on you today, and we're going to Jamila said, just set the stage, Julia, just set the stage. So we're going to set the stage for some real action and activities, and we respect and we need each of your opinions and your contributions. We've got a lot of work to do, and we're ready to get started. Thank you all.
Diane, would you like to add your welcome remarks?
Thank you. And thank you to the chairman and to our other fellow commissioners. It's been 4 long years since we sat around this table, and so much has happened in the business and the industry that I think it will be incumbent upon us to not talk about where we've been so much as to talk about where we're going, and to look forward and to say, here's where we are today. What do we need to do today to make difference, to make changes, to make it so that our broadcast and digital world resembles that which we serve? And I think that's the goal for all of us here. And I think looking for new solutions and being more about doing than talking is what I think we hope all of us to accomplish, because many of us have been doing this for a while. Now we're going to do it with some outcome. So I thank you all. I look forward to working with you, and we're off to better things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've got a bit of formal business to take care of, and I'll just give you a little overview. I'm going to take official roll, so I'll call each of your names for those here present and any that are participating by phone, because I do understand we have a few that are participating by phone. We will welcome you in that way as well, after which we'd like for the members to go around the table and tell a little bit about yourself, your expertise, so we start to not only get to know each other, but so our viewing audience will also have an opportunity to understand the power and the expertise and the commitment around the table. So with that, let me start off with just a formal roll call. Kathleen Abernathy, Commissioner Kathleen Abernathy.
I'm here.
Yes. Maria Brennan.
She is absent. She sent her regrets earlier.
Thank you. Mr. Rudy Brochet. Mr. Ron Busby. Okay. Victor C. Is it Serta?
Yep.
Yes. Bridget Daniels.
Yes. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Dean Dates.
Here.
Linda Dunn. Donna Epps.
Here.
Andre Fernandez.
Here.
Marie Coley.
Here.
Marita Coley. I say Marie. Heather Gate.
Here.
Brother David Honig. CEO Janice. How do you pronounce your last name? For Howrod?
Janice Bryant Howroyd.
Howroyd, yes. Dr. Ron Johnson.
Here.
I think I saw Sherman. Sherman is here. Kizzard. Flamita, and let me get this last name. Kathari.
It's Fatima Kotari.
We were close. Fatima.
And I'm here.
Yes. Mayor Mark Marial.
Present. Thank you.
Javier Palomares.
Present.
Henry Rivera is absent. Alfredo Rodriguez.
Good morning.
Good morning. Brian Scarpelli.
Here.
I think Cindy Chow is by phone.
Yes, I'm here.
Welcome. Marie Silla Dixon.
Good morning.
Dr. Nicole Turner Lee.
Here.
Brent Wilkes is here. Mr. James Winston.
Here.
And Chris Wood.
Good morning.
Okay. Is that all of our members are accounted for?
Excellent.
Yes.
Mario Lopez.
I'm here.
Did we miss Mario Lopez? Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Apologies, you are on our list.
Is there anyone else that we missed? Anyone else on the phone that we've not acknowledged? Seeing that, then we'll say that the roll call has been officially made. And from there, we're going to go around and allow the members of the committee to introduce themselves, tell a bit about yourself and your expertise, and we'll start with Commissioner Abernathy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's a tremendous privilege to be here today with all of you, and I am humbled by the expertise in the room. My background is many years in the telecom sector. I'm not going to give an exact number. A former FCC commissioner, most recently retired from Frontier Communications, where we spent a tremendous amount of time trying to build out rural infrastructure, broadband to rural America, to places that sometimes don't even have phone service. And it is difficult and challenging and hard, and it is life-changing when it gets there. So I'm very excited to take some of those real-world lessons of what can and can't be done and how to leverage that. And then, of course, just working for greater inclusion of all people in this wonderful sector in which we all live and operate.
Thank you. Hello, good morning, everybody. I'm Nicole Turner-Lee. I'm a fellow at the Brookings Institution in our Governance Studies Department, and more specifically in the Center for Technology Innovation. I am serving a second term on this committee, so very happy to have it recharted under the leadership of Ms. Julia Johnson. Appreciate you, as well as Diane. It's our second time around, as well as the FCC officials. Thank you very much for having us. My background is in digital inclusion, so I've spent about 25 years working both as a digital activist as well as an academic on these issues. In particular, my focus on digital inclusion is just ensuring equitable access to both infrastructure and programs, as well as other factors that accelerate broadband deployment and broadband adoption and use. For those of you that also know me, I also dabble in spectrum policy, diversity in tech, and all the other ancillary issues that go with moving towards a more equitable digital ecosystem, ownership as well. So I could go on, but I'm not, because there's a whole lot of other people that have to talk. But thank you again, and look forward to providing both the academic expertise as well as the congressional legislative expertise on this issue.
Good morning. Hello. My name is Christopher Wood. I'm the Executive Director of LGBT Tech. We really focus on the intersection of LGBT communities and technology, including communications. It's an honor to be here. I come from a background of working in the nonprofit sector, as well as in broadcast television, specifically working for Discovery Communications. I also represent and live in a rural community in both West Virginia and Virginia, so bringing that perspective as well. I look forward to being here and bringing the perspective of both the LGBT, rural, and others that I have. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Jim Winston. I'm the president of NABOB, the National Association of Black-Owned Broadcasters. I've had the pleasure of being on the Diversity Committee ever since the first one was initiated by Chairman Powell. So I've seen the ebbs and flows of our ability to be helpful to the Commission and having a voice that the Commission has recognized. And I look forward to being able to help this committee with some of that historical perspective. NABOB is an association of the African American owners of radio and television stations around the country. We've been in existence since 1976. And like everything else in the telecommunications industry, we've had our ebbs and flows in terms of successful increases in African American ownership, and in recent years, an unfortunate decline in that ownership. So addressing the policies of diversity and inclusion here at the Commission is an important issue for NABOB. In addition, I'm a partner in the law firm of Reuben Winston, Dirks, Harrison Cook here in Washington, specializing in telecommunications representation. So I oftentimes get to see the implications of the policies that the Commission adopts in terms of how they affect broadcasters in the day-to-day ability to comply with its regulations. So I look forward to addressing all those issues as part of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Brent Wilkes. I'm the CEO of the League of United Latin American Citizens. We're the nation's oldest Latino organization, started in 1929. And we focus a lot on digital inclusion. We've built a network of 68 technology centers across the country to provide internet access to low-income Latino communities throughout the nation, and to focus on building the tools of digital inclusion at the centers. We've created a series of PSAs to encourage our community, both in English and Spanish, to adopt broadband. And we've worked hard to really focus on getting the tech industry to be more inclusive through our Tech Summit, the Latino Tech Summit, which this year will take place on October 27th and 28th. And the goal there is really to both put pressure on companies to hire more Latinos, and at the same time to bring great talent through the STEM initiatives that many Latino organizations are pursuing to these companies to make sure that they have great talent that they can hire. So we're very excited to be part of the commission. Looking forward to challenging the ideas that we can come up with. I believe that the challenges facing our community are very, very significant. If we don't solve this problem, we could lose a generation of opportunity for our communities. But I do believe that this committee has a chance to really make a difference. So I'm looking forward to the discussions.
Good morning. Marie Silla, Vice President of Government Affairs and External Affairs, and it is truly a pleasure to be here this morning. This is the first time that T-Mobile has participated on this task force, so I'm very glad to be representing them. We're the third largest wireless carrier with approximately 74 million subscribers. My role in the company is I focus primarily on spectrum policy. Also, I have helped to lead our efforts on our digital inclusion programming that we have at the company. And I can tell you that for our CEO, John Ledger, D&I is at the top of his list, and he takes this very serious. And I'm looking forward to giving my expertise and that of our company as well. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Scarpelli, and I am a Senior Policy Counsel with ACT, the App Association. We're a nonprofit trade association representing thousands of small business software developers, small businesses, and even one or two person shops. So there's a wide diversity of business models and sectors and cross-sector business models, I guess, that our members are involved with, and echoing some of the remarks made by the chairman and our commissioners, we have a strong commitment to closing the digital divide and really bringing the power of what we term the app economy to disadvantaged communities that don't have currently aren't able to leverage next generation networks. So very pleased to be here. Just a little blurb about myself, my background. I actually I hope I can contribute in a number of ways to this committee. I grew up in a family-owned rural AM/FM radio group. Have worked for a number of trade associations, including a state broadcasting association, as well as at the federal level, several standard-setting organizations and trade associations from the telecom industry before moving over to work for the small business developer community. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Alfredo Rodriguez. I represent Dish Network, and in particular, I am the Vice President of Dish Latino. Dish Latino is a brand and a product, essentially a suite of programming packages that has both the best in English language programming as well as Spanish. We serve over 1.5 million subscribers. We're the leader in the space. And while there are 50 million U.S. Hispanics in this country, our focus is primarily those that are Spanish dominant, bilingual, and Spanish preferred. We look forward to participating in this commission, in this advisory panel, and using the insights that have led us to be the leader in this space over the past couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Javier Palomares, and I'm the President and CEO of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. This is my second go-round, so happy to re-up under the leadership of Julia Johnson. The United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce represents 4.2 million Hispanic-owned firms in this country that collectively contribute over $668 billion to the American economy. We advocate on behalf of 274 major corporations, and we do this through a network of over 200 local chambers throughout the country. I'm particularly interested, and our association will be particularly interested in looking at how access to capital and contracting with our Hispanic-owned firms can help move this work in the appropriate direction. Happy to see good friends and collaborators like Ron Busby, Victor Cerda, Marie Dixon, Donna Epps, Brent Wilkes, Miss Janice Howroyd, who I haven't seen in a bit, and of course the one and only Mark Morial, a good advisor and counselor of mine, as part of this committee, because I think they'll bring an immeasurable amount of advice and counsel that will be very useful to me and to the rest of the council. And then finally, just happy to be here and hopeful that we can add something of value to this important body. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. I'm Mark Morial. I'm president of the National Urban League. We are now 107 years old. And 100 years ago, we focused on helping African Americans transition from a rural economy to an industrial economy, from living in the countryside to living in the cities. 107 years later, I think we're focused on helping people transition from an industrial economy to a knowledge economy, helping people transition from an urban economy to a global economy. And the touch points for us in that are the issues of ownership, jobs, be they frontline jobs or C-suite jobs, and thirdly, access, because access to technology, the best technology, is a civil and human rights issue in the 21st century, because no longer is access to this technology a nicety of life, it's a necessity of life. So along those lines, I look forward to working with each and every one of you. I want to thank Julia, and certainly thank Chairman Pai and Commissioner Clyburn and Commissioner O'Reilly, but really think it's timely that this effort be revived and have come, like all of you, for serious business and to get something done, to make a difference, to put our mark on these issues, not to be here for the sake of being here. Each and every one of you is accomplished and busy, and so I hope that you'll join me in saying, let's make this meaningful and worthwhile. So thank you very much. I'm honored to be a part.
Thanks, everyone. I am Mario Lopez, president of the Hispanic Leadership Fund. We're an advocacy organization based here in Washington, D.C., and we promote public policy that strengthens liberty, opportunity, and prosperity for all Americans. So as such, as you all know, increasingly in the 21st century, that has to and must include digital policy, telecommunications, all the issues that have been mentioned and that the Federal Communications Commission touches upon. So we're really excited to be here to participate. It's my first time on participating in such a committee, so very honored to be here with you all. Hoping to learn a little bit and contribute where possible, and we're eager to get going on some of the commissioners have mentioned, on some of the regulatory issues, especially how they impact just normal, everyday working Americans who are, especially lower middle class, who are struggling to get ahead, and how digital policy and internet broadband issues affect them and allow them to be able to work and thrive and grow. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Fatima Kotari, and I'm honored to be representing the San Francisco Bay Area Internet Society. I bring my skills and experience from over a decade spent in the telecommunications and the overall technology sector, both here in DC as well as Silicon Valley right now. The Internet Society is a nonprofit that has championed the cause of an open, inclusive internet for the past 25 years. And specifically, the San Francisco Bay Area chapter seeks to bridge the digital divide that exists even in California and work around issues of digital empowerment and push the envelope for underrepresented communities and minorities, especially women and women of color, to participate in the digital economy and in turn drive socioeconomic change in their local communities. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be a part of this committee, and I hope to bring my experience and knowledge from working on the ground to make recommendations that hopefully will push the needle for the issues that we're going to be advocating.
Good morning, everyone. To Chairman Johnson, Vice Chairman Sutter, congratulations to both of you and to all my colleagues that are serving on the committee. My name is Sherman Kizart. I'm the Managing Director of Kizart Media Partners in Chicago, Illinois. This is certainly a privilege to have an opportunity to serve on the Diversity Committee. My first opportunity to serve on the committee dates back when Chairman Johnson served on the first committee, and I had the privilege and honor of serving as an industry expert. I had to do my work there, and then in efforts of having an opportunity to get to serve on the full committee. But the work that we did was around the FCC's first discriminatory advertising study. If you remember, when number one is not enough, I had the opportunity to work with the FCC on that important work, and that set a foundation for the work we had to do in some other important areas, including becoming a full member of the committee during the next phase and working with Commissioners Adelstein and McDowell in helping to meet with members of the advertising community, the 4As, and where we actually created a non-discrimination policy and complaint review process that helped eliminate or is helping to eliminate discriminatory advertising practices among the country's leading advertisers and agencies. So that's an initiative that I've had an opportunity to work both in the committee and with different commissioners and other members of the FCC around some important issues that are impacting African American and Hispanic broadcasters. So I was certainly excited about having the opportunity to serve on the FCC Diversity Committee after a conversation with Chairman Pai back earlier this year. Kizart Media Partners is my company that my background is in national advertising and marketing, and about a year and a half ago, my company participated in an FCC auction where I am now the owner of a 50,000 watt station in my hometown of Cleveland, Mississippi. So the work that we get to do, to hear Chairman Pai talk about things like incubated minority ownership models and others, along with closing the digital divide, would be very, very, very important to me. I'm excited about the work that we have here and the people that we get to work with, like my good friend and partner Jim Winston at NABOP, who I've been working with for years, and people like Dean Dates, who I had the privilege of serving with when she was the chairman of Howard University School of Communication. So thank you again, Chairman Johnson, for your leadership, and I'm looking forward to being a resource and working with you and the other members of the committee going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair. My name is Marita Coley. I'm Executive Vice President of Multicultural Media, Telecom, and Internet Council, who I'm representing here today. For those of you who don't know, and I hope there's no one here who doesn't know about MMTC, we have an over 30-year history of advocating before the Federal Communications Commission for diversity and inclusion in broadcast and telecom, cable, all aspects for ownership and opportunity and access. I'd like to acknowledge our founder, David Honig, who is can introduce himself, but would definitely like to advocate to tell you about some of the things that he's done to keep MMTC at the forefront of these issues. We also have representation on the Chairman's Broadband Deployment Advisory Committee by our CEO, Kim Keenan. So MMTC makes it a point to make sure that we are at the forefront in taking the issues that are important to our underserved communities and entrepreneurs, and making sure the FCC is really advised about the issues that are unique to our communities. By way of background, this is, I guess, maybe my fourth act. I've been in the industry for quite a long time, from the years when I was an associate, when the building was at 19th and M, when I used to run filings up to that building as a young associate and later partner at Cole, Raven & Braverman, Davis Wright Tremaine. And then I went in-house as with Black Entertainment Television it's still wonderful, but during the glory days when it was an African American owned publicly traded company. It was the highlight of my career to be part of that team and to see exactly what multicultural entrepreneurs can do, not only in terms of increasing diversity, but the really thousands of multicultural professionals that largely African American that have been deployed out into every aspect of the industries. It's a model of what we can do when we have minority ownership. More recently, I was executive director of an economic empowerment nonprofit that focused on asset building for underserved communities, and that really led to my coming to MMTC and sort of using the skills that I learned in the industry to help MMTC advocate for greater opportunity for multicultural communities. My specialties, I'd say, would probably be multicultural cable networks. I represented almost 40 cable networks at the time, and that's a passion that I have. But I'd also like to bring to this table some of the things that we've done at MMTC in partnership with Mark Morial at National Urban League and the Wireless Infrastructure Association, where we have a telecom and wireless apprenticeship program where we're in the process of putting a very large number of women and people of color in the kinds of jobs that are the jobs of the future in technology and telecom. I'm very pleased to be here. This is my first time at this table, and I look forward to being part of the committee. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Johnson and Officer Johnson. And a big thank you to you, to Chairman Pai, and to Commissioners Clyburn and O'Reilly. The work that we do here is truly important, and I'm honored to be of service to it. My name is Janice Bryant Helroyd, and I am the founder and CEO of the Act One Group. Through our verticals of Apple One, we provide staffing across 3 continents. Through our vertical of Agile One, we provide technology and process to enterprise and through small companies that allow for total talent communities. And through our background check company, A-Check, we provide risk management for both employees and employers through the talent they service. The important thing I think about the work that I will bring to this committee is that having grown up in a rural town of Tarboro, North Carolina, partnered by Princeville, we've seen the advantage and the disadvantage of what comes from a strong FCC. We've seen where communities destroyed by flood and rebuilt have needed the work of this FCC. Importantly, as a CEO, I'm working across industries and companies as well as with talent that can exhibit what we need around diversity, which is not inclusion, and servicing underserved and underengaged communities and people. My work with universities includes work with North Carolina A&T State University, graduating a population of the largest number of African American engineers in this nation, as well as one of the fastest growing population of other minority and women engineers. Additionally, I serve on the boards of organizations such as the Los Angeles Urban League, where we see the vitality of opportunity from youth and from local communities that we can totally engage in this discussion and benefit this nation from. My work with women's organizations, where I serve on boards of WeBink, WeConnect, and Marsha Firestone-led WPO, includes an opportunity for women owners and their talent to have a voice and, more importantly, to have a participation in building out infrastructure, media, and digital inclusion in how they gain opportunity, again, importantly, how they service this nation. It's my consideration that how we communicate and the technologies that support that offer us some of our greatest advantage around risk aversion and around inclusion and economic empowerment. So I'm truly honored that I gained the opportunity to bring my expertise to this. I will lastly say that as the parent of young African American male and female, we also have the opportunity to have second-generation businesses, and we know that when we are able to encourage second-generation wealth in this nation, we encourage not only the fiscal responsibility from a taxpayer base, but the opportunity for all communities to benefit from and contribute to the American dream. Operating in over 22 countries, the American dream does not belong to Americans alone. We've inspired many nations. Our culture has been the foundation and the seeding for so many nations, young nations and emerging nations, in how they will contribute to the next century of how we live on planet Earth. So I'm truly honored to be able to work both in the detail of how we manifest that, importantly, on the holistic perspective of how we bring that to this country and to the world. And I thank you. I thank you so much, Chairman Johnson, for your vision to this. I look forward to the work that we can do.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm David Honig. I had the great privilege of serving from the inception to the conclusion of the first Diversity Committee as its rapporteur, which meant I got to take notes and keep track of stuff. And my big observation, I think, from that position was that if you get consumers, producers, distributors, financiers, scholars, and regulators all in the same room with the most creative minds talking to each other and sharing their perspectives, you can come up with some amazing good ideas and float them, and that no one else would come up with any other way. And hopefully the FCC would be humble enough to consider them, and some of them get across the finish line. What was the fruit of all of that work was, if you go on the FCC's website under previous diversity committees, you will see some over 40 recommendations. It was probably the most prolific advisory committee that the FCC and maybe almost any agency operated during the time it operated. I don't know why they terminated it, but it was incredibly productive. And two of the big recommendations that it came up with did actually get adopted. One of them to relax the access to capital restrictions imposed by the foreign ownership rules. I want to credit, in particular, Commissioner O'Reilly. One of the first things he did in the commission was to seize on that and help get it across the finish line 5-0 in 2009. And the other that Sherman Kizart just mentioned, that he and Jim Winston moved and got the commission to do, and Jim really started this in 1984, was the end of No Urban, No Spanish Dictates advertising discrimination that after a 23-year fight got concluded in 2007 by a unanimous vote. So it's possible to win some victories. I think Chairman Pai is very sincere about wanting to be attentive to the actual results that are produced. We won't see, again, the process result in a great many recommendations, few of which cross the finish line. I think if we come up with good recommendations, a great many of them are going to cross the finish line from what we've heard. And And I think certainly we can be very confident that our hard work and volunteer dedication is not going to be in vain this time. That's it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Heather Gate, and I'm the Director of Digital Inclusion. With digital inclusion in my title, I live and breathe digital inclusion. For over a decade, I've worked with Connected Nation to support and lead programs that are specifically designed to advance digital inclusion for vulnerable communities. So whether it is working in Appalachia, Kentucky, or advancing digital inclusion in Ohio, job training, or training in Arizona on a tribal land, I've been there, I've done that, and I continue to be passionate about that. So I'm very humbled and excited to be here, and I look forward to working with all of you to continue this work that, although in my period of working in digital inclusion, I've seen changes, but the needs still exist. And so I'm excited to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to serve. Thank you.
First of all, good morning, Madam Chairman, and my colleagues who joined me around the table this morning. I'm very excited to be here. In fact, I'm elated to be here to see many of you that I worked with before. This is my third time serving in this capacity, and I certainly look forward to working with all of you all. I am currently the Chief Strategist and Advisor to WIA, the Wireless Infrastructure Association, on diversity and inclusion. WIA, as you know, is a 237-plus member organization based here in Alexandria, Virginia. For the last 15 years before I retired, I ran a small infrastructure wireless company doing business throughout America. And certainly enjoyed a lot of wonderful experiences and would like to share some of those with you as we try to roll out an agenda and look at some of the issues that the Chairman Pai and others have offered up this morning. In addition to that, I currently serve as Commissioner with the Fairfax County Economic Development Authority. This is my 17th year there, and hopefully I can bring some perspectives of state and local government to our discussion here. And also involved for the last 35 years with historically black colleges and universities and minority institutions. And so hopefully there is a confluence of all of these things, and hopefully they will have some bearing on our discussions and recommendations here. So again, it's great to be here. I look forward to working with all of you all, meeting new friends, and sharing perspectives with those that I've known from previous engagements. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Andre Fernandez. I'm the president and the CEO of CBS Radio. And on behalf of the, I think, over 15,000 men and women at the CBS Corporation, I'd like to thank you and looking forward to participating on this very distinguished committee. My division within CBS Radio, is the second largest radio broadcaster in America, with over 3,500 full-time employees, 117 stations in 26 markets, including all the top 10 markets. We operate across all of the radio formats. We are news, sports, all the music formats you could imagine, including Hispanic as well, a few Hispanic stations. I personally have experience across a number of aspects of local media, even beyond radio. Prior to joining CBS Radio as its president, I was the president of Journal Communications, which was a publicly traded media company based in Milwaukee with a national presence, an operator of television stations, radio stations, newspapers, direct mail, magazines, even a printing operation. And then prior to that, I was the CFO of Telemundo, for 4.5 years based in Miami when I worked at GE and when NBC acquired Telemundo back in 2003. I've also worked outside the United States for about 10 years of my career. And my employees know I often draw examples of my experiences, not only in media, but also outside of media, and having worked in places such as the UK, Mexico, and Brazil. I grew up in a bicultural, bilingual home at a time where I remember my dad and my grandparents, probably the only media option available to them growing up in the New York area was Channel 41 and Channel 47 that you could sort of get on your UHF band, although it was very foggy. And so with that perspective, it is on the one hand amazing to see how far programming has come for that community, but also on the same time how much more left there is to do for communities such as that. So I'm very excited to be part of this committee and to be able to contribute as best as I can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning. I'm Donna Epps. I'm Vice President for Public Policy and Strategic Alliances for Verizon. I'd like to add my appreciation to Chairman Pai for rechartering this committee and also thank Madam Chairwoman Johnson for agreeing to serve. This is my second tour of duty on this committee, and I'm just excited to be here and for all the expertise that I've heard around the room, looking around the room, seeing so many good friends and partners working on an issue that we care deeply about, me personally, as well as the company that I represent, Verizon. A little bit of background about me. My background is a regulatory lawyer focusing for many years on very technical issues in this very building, everything from getting into long distance, which certainly dates me, to a number of consumer protection issues. I spend most of my time now on looking at policies that will help accelerate the deployment of next generation networks as we think about broadband and how it's evolving, looking at how can we make sure that we roll out these facilities as quickly as possible and as widely as possible so that we can serve all communities, and looking forward to sharing my expertise on what we're seeing on the ground in terms of challenges and opportunities to deploying next generation networks. Really pleased to represent a company that really gets diversity, and that's from the top. We have one of the most diverse boards of the Fortune 20 companies. And just later this week, we're going to debut a documentary that we underwrote called Without a Net, which focuses on the very critical issue of the digital divide in schools, in the education sector. One of our huge focuses is trying to make sure that we increase the amount of diversity in STEM careers, because we all know that that is the future, and we have 600 million unfilled STEM jobs in the country currently. And so we spend a lot of time on making sure that in particular black and brown people and women have the skills that they need and have the opportunities that they deserve to participate in the digital economy. One of our signature programs we're very proud of that we've partnered with 16 HBCUs and Hispanic serving organizations is called Minority Mail Makers, and it focuses on educating minority middle school boys on everything from robotics and coding to 3D printing. So really just excited to be here and look forward to working with all of my colleagues around the table to not just talk about it, but to actually make real progress. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Linda Spradley Dunn, and I'm the CEO and founder of Odyssey Media. I am delighted to be here, to be in a room with Janice and Julia and Mark and all the people that I respect so dearly who have enabled my company to succeed. So Odyssey Media is focused on connecting multicultural women and multi-ethnic women around the world. We're located in the USA, London, Paris, Bermuda, and soon to open in Africa. Our focus is corporate execs and small business owners. In particular, I am so glad to be here to really focus on small business owners, particularly multicultural women, and making sure we have the access to capital to institute and implement some of the solutions that I know will come out of this group. I think the biggest tragedy would be to come up with great solutions, and then those solutions are implemented in undeserved communities by others. So my focus is access to capital, matching venture firms with African American, Latina, and Asian women who have solutions in this area for our communities. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you.
Good morning. And colleagues, I join everyone in saying how pleased I am to be here and excited to be a part of this. I'm an educator, Janet Dates, and I taught at Howard University for a number of years. Also taught at 2 other universities as well. And my area of interest was in diversity in the mass media. That's where my research took me. I also served as Dean of the School of Communications for 19 years, and as a member of boards, for example, Peabody and MMTC and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So I've had an opportunity to hear from people who are trying to really make a difference in what happens in the media that we're so concerned about. The research interest that I had made me really start focusing on diversity as it affects our community. And one of the books that I worked on was Split Image. Actually, David Honig and I started on that together many years ago. And then I did a book on the Obamas on the mass media and the ways in which history is repeating itself in terms of how communications are being used by groups of people. And we need to be sure that we're helping to move in directions that are going to benefit the African American and other minority group communities. The book that I'm working on now has to do with humor, that is, black humor, and the communications that comes from and toward the black community. My area of interest for this particular group is, of course, diversity in media, and I'd want to be focused on that. And thank you again for the opportunity to be a part of this group.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and Vice Chair Mrs. Souter, and of course Chairman Pai and Clyburn and O'Reilly. Like many around the room, this is my second time with this committee, and I think we're all very elated to have its resurrection rechartering. I think Vice Chair Sutter, you said it best when, since 2013, the industry has changed tremendously. And I think we all have our work cut out for us. My name is Bridget Daniel. I'm the Executive Vice President of Wilco Electronic Systems. And Wilco is a private cable company located in Philadelphia. And we have proudly served the underserved community in Philadelphia for over 40 years. It was a company started by my father, Will Daniel, and he is the pioneer of even bringing cable first to Philadelphia in the 80s. When I came on board to our company, my legacy was also providing the advanced network from that. So it wasn't just cable and that jack in the wall. We started to now be a provider of internet and other technology services that were also missing from those underserved communities. So I like to liken my legacy as not just being the consumer or having services that people consume, but also really moving into having services that people can also engage and be a participant of, particularly in minority underserved communities in Philadelphia. The digital divide is still very present there. 40% still do not have access to some type of internet. So we have been a large collaborator in providing underserved communities low-cost internet that reached around 350,000 citizens in Philadelphia. One thing that we're really focusing on now is being not just the access of technology, but the access to opportunities. So working with minority-focused groups and nonprofits to bring access to jobs in technology, bring access to resources that are around technology, and to also really kind of get into that field of diversity and inclusion of those who normally don't have that seat at the table, whether that's being a tech entrepreneur, being a techie, or just having access to the opportunities to work the power from your phone, being an application developer. Those are kind of the next steps that we're taking for our company. And I think that's where this committee is going towards for its focus moving forward. So we're very, of course, honored to be here, and I welcome the opportunity to work with all these experts and colleagues for the next 2 years. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Victor Serta. I'm from Vema Media, Inc. They say that in public speaking, the success you will have depends on who spoke before you and your timing. So I have a lot of challenges over here in front of me. I really am honored and humbled hearing and being participant to this group of very accomplished individuals in a very important segment for not only minority community, but for the entire country. And I'm thankful to Chairman Pai for reconstituting this group. And I'm looking forward to working with the chair on this committee and take forward, with full faith, the goal of action versus just theoretical thinking. Venma Media Inc., we are, and I'm proud to say, Hispanic-owned and Hispanic-operated network in the United States based in Miami. We have 3 channels, 2 in Spanish and 1 in English. And I know that I stand here as a part of that group in a fortunate position because it's a challenging world to navigate and broadcast and to get to where we have so far. Hurricane Irma was being in Miami was a good reminder of what happens when you don't have access to electricity, television, and the internet and your phone. You realize that the world closes down on you, and it is a reminder that there are still communities out there in the United States that are not given access, that have those worlds closed. So hopefully this committee here can breach that gap and include more and more, particularly in the African American and Latino community. I look forward to working with everyone here. I am somebody who brings a perspective of having started at the government level my first 10 years, and so I appreciate the efforts of the FCC and the chairman and the opportunity they bring to bring us together to provide input to those who are implementing our rules and regulations and laws. I also stand in the perspective that I deal with in the last 6 years with the media side, where I have producers, editors, production companies, content providers that depend on me, and I can see the impact it has on the lives of these individuals and how we, in my situation in Miami, how I affect the Latino community of entertainers, producers, those involved in the broadcast world. So I'm proud to have that opportunity. I know that there's a lot dependent upon me, and I depend upon others, including some of the members here at the table. I am thankful for the help I have received from some of the members, Marita, Javier, Brent, and I look forward to helping others by contributing to this. So thank you very much, and again, I give my sincere thanks to Chairman Pai for bringing us together again.
Good morning. My name is Rudy Brioche, representing Comcast Corporation and NBC Universal. It's great to see many of you around here. It's a lot of familiar faces. I feel like we've aged a bit, but everyone still looks quite healthy. That's good.
You're still cute, Rudy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That was the setup, so thank you very much for that. Folks have said I've aged like 10 years in the past 2 weeks, but that's not the case. I'm holding this until the New York Giants win a game, and then it's off. So that's the challenge I have. But it's really great to be here because I come at this from 2 perspectives. Personally, as a Haitian American first generation, diversity is essential. I heard earlier Chairman Pai's comments. There is a certain personal passion that you bring to this area. It's not academic, it's not technical. There is an actual personal commitment dimension that is essential. Without it, whether it's a corporation, whether it's a commission or an individual, you'll get nowhere without having some type of personal commitment to this endeavor. So it's great to hear Chairman Pai speak specifically from a personal perspective. I come at this primarily from a personal perspective, and then I come at this from a perspective of someone who is representing Comcast and NBC Universal. And that's where another degree of pride comes in. The work of Comcast and NBC Universal has been landmark in the past 10 years. We all know since the NBC convergence with the Comcast, the areas of commitment of the company have been broad, whether it's within the board or supplier diversity, programming. In space after space, we've actually have increased our own goals, which means that when you set a particular metric, when you set a particular goal and you try to achieve it, oftentimes if it's driven by the right motivations, if it's driven by passion, as it is in Comcast within the actual company itself, you surpass your actual goals, and that's what we've done in many areas. So we come at this with an open heart. We come at this recognizing that we have to set some clear goals and objectives of what we want to accomplish. We need to have some sincere commitment behind it. And finally, we need to roll up our sleeves and get to work. So we come at this in all areas, prepared to bring that and to have a successful 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And for the committee members that are participating by phone, if you could. The mic is open. And if you're on mute, you might want to press the button.
Is Cindy Shao on the line? Going once. Going twice. Okay, Cindy, we may come back to you if you're having any technical difficulties. No worries.
Okay. So I'd like to again congratulate, thank, and salute each and every one of you for your commitment to service and for your passion around the work of this committee. The next, let me go ahead and kind of preview the rest of the afternoon, because I know many of you have tight schedules, and we appreciate you making the time to come to this organizational meeting. We will be taking a 15-minute break and right at about 11:30. When we return at 11:45 sharp, we're going to have an overview. Paula will go through overview of the responsibilities under the Act. Many of you are familiar with the responsibilities and obligations. For some of you, this will be new, and others a refresher. At about 12, we will have an overview of this particular FACA and specific Q&A opportunities for each of you. At about 12:10, we'd like an open discussion led primarily by the subcommittee chairs. Just talking through at a very high level the expectations and the types of issues that should be teed up through the particular working groups. And through that process, one of the things that the chairman wanted to do, he did not want to pre-select members for different committees. He wanted the members to determine which of the working groups they would actually be in. So I believe the team will be passing out ballots for you to put your first and your
They
it's
should
already
be
there.
should be in the folders.
So if you look in your folders then, and you'll have an opportunity to give us your first, second, and third priority in terms of assignment. We thought that hearing some open discussion around the key issues that will be addressed in each of those sessions would sort of serve as a guiding principle for you to make your selection. Once we've gotten that information collected, and we would hope to get that by the end of today. We will quickly make some determinations as to breaking these groups up into relatively even numbers, and can answer any questions you might have around that. The chairman will also be looking to both others that have applied in the process to help build out those working groups with subject matter experts that can also assist the groups. And we'll also be taking the names of others that might be interested in being subject matter experts. The chairman will also look at not only having the chair, but also determining from those members that have signed up for the group the appropriate vice chair. And then we will end at about 12:55 with an opportunity for public comments for those in our both listening or present here that would like to add comments. And hopefully we will adjourn as promised at 1 o'clock. And with that, it is 11:27. Do we have any questions before we take our 15-minute break? Or, Madam Vice Chair, is there anything that I left off the list there? Any questions? So I would say you may want to hear after the break and after you hear the discussion, and we would really like for it to be an open discussion amongst the members here as the type of issues that we think will be teed up, because we would want you to be kind of mindful of the issues that will be presented in each group as you make your determination. Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, we will break until 11:45. Thank you very much. Start back in about 5 minutes, if everyone could settle in. give ourselves a couple minutes. If everyone could settle in, please. If everyone could settle in. Would like to reconvene the meeting. It's now 12 o'clock, but we had a little leeway in our time, so we took it so that people could better get to know each other and start thinking about and formulating issues for discussion during our next session. But if we could settle in, it would be wonderful. And very quickly, while people are settling in, my vice chair, who is an extraordinary vice chair, she just reminded me that someone asked that we had not introduced ourselves. So it's like I'm Prince, and that's all I need to say, right? And she said, not quite, Julia. They don't know who you are. So I'm Julia Johnson, and my background is in regulated utilities. I had the opportunity in the 90s to serve as the chair of the Florida Public Service Commission as we dealt with deregulation of the telecommunications industry and the transition to more competition in the electric sector as well. I also had the honor and the privilege of serving as the chair of the state board for the Universal Service Board that dealt with bringing internet access to schools and libraries. It was the very first board. We created the process and the structure for allowing schools and libraries to have access to the internet. After I left that public service, I worked for a company that commercialized military technology in the telecommunications space for the benefit of our communities, and it was an extraordinary entrepreneurial opportunity. I created Net Communications, which is a firm that focuses on regulatory analysis, public affairs, and advancing diversity. And it's an honor and a privilege to have the opportunity to chair the Diversity Council, given the distinguished men and women that are around the table. Brother Honig stole my thunder to talk about the very first diversity committee that was convened by Chairman Powell and the success that we had because of the commitment of the people. I would say to you that this group is even more extraordinary. The commitment, the talent, and the passion around these issues, coupled with a chairman of the FCC who is telling us to just get it done. So I appreciate the opportunity to serve with each and every one of you. Diane?
Thank you. I've spent some time with a number of you in this room before. This is my fourth tour of duty for the fourth chairman that I've had the privilege of serving under. I started in this town on the Hill, but the bulk of my work has been in broadcasting, operations of radio and television stations. I've managed both radio and TV, and then had the opportunity to manage a group of radio and television stations, and then eventually started my own company and bought television. I have seen the challenges and lived the challenges that come with being the only woman in the room, or being the person asking for money from an equity firm that had never lent or invested in a woman's company before. So I'm happy to say they did, and they have since done other women and other minorities that have gotten them a lot of money. And that's the sign of how you get more money, to go back and do that. But because of the challenges that I saw firsthand, and because of the opportunities I had as the president of television for Shamrock, where I had untold amounts of opportunity, because I worked for a fabulous company and had a great mentor, I thought there was a way that others should be able to benefit from that kind of an opportunity. And so I created 18 years ago the Broadcast Leadership Training Program, which is a 10-month executive-style MBA program to train women and minorities to become owners and CEOs of broadcast properties. The National Association of Broadcasters has been my partner in that program. Their education foundation does that, and we have a significant number of broadcasters who have gone through that. And the program is created by, run by, and funded by broadcasters. And one of the challenges that caused it to be created, frankly, was when Chairman Kennard at the time stood at the NAB breakfast and said, we have to come up with solutions because the courts had just struck down yet another set of EEO rules. We have to come up with solutions that don't require other people to be able to decide if we can get something done. And so that was the beginning of the Broadcast Leadership Training Program, and we are 18 years later. All the women and minorities in this program are fully fellowed. It's about a $20,000 commitment to each of the participants, and they have gone on to become owners and CEOs and are the leaders of the industry. So it is hopefully a way that we can look at how do we create something that we can actually control and get up and running and make it work. I've been privileged to also be a part on the advisory board of MMTC, as well as a past national president of the Alliance for Women in Media, and I'm excited about the opportunity of results. Thank you.
Thank you. We've been joined by Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who chairs the CBC Foundation. First, I want to thank you and honor you for participating. It is such an honor to have her here. The CBC Foundation and the CBC, they have been committed to issues of digital inclusion and empowerment, particularly under her leadership. There's a special focus. So thank you for your participation, and if at any point you'd like to make comments.
The chairwoman is more than kind, Chairwoman Johnson, for yielding to the gentlelady. There are so many friends in the room that I wanted to make just a very preliminary stop to welcome, I believe, this first meeting of a very important committee. It gives me great privilege to, obviously, if I begin naming a lot of names, and Marie, if I start talking about the president of the wonderful National Urban League, who has had a consistent voice. My board member is on your board, and I'm a little biased against and for Janice Holroyd, who has an enormous understanding of these issues, and I welcome her. This is in the backdrop of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, 47th ALC. So many of you participated and made such vital and vibrant comments. And so to all of you, let me say, without dating myself, I remember Vice President Al Gore's first entreat into this effort of connecting America and the discovery of the internet and the technology. I remember the promises that were made, the legislation that we passed to secure funding to connect. Your challenge now is to make the dream a reality, and it is now 2017. Interconnectivity is crucial for urban and rural areas. I might say that as a member of the Homeland Security Committee, it is crucial for our national safety and security. Being reminded of 9/11, we know full well that connectivity between even the first responders was a challenge. But moving forward, I would just offer these thoughts. We now face places in the United States, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, who are not connected. We know that there are numbers of infrastructure that has to be improved. Even though you're not building infrastructure, you're talking about making sure that this is a whole system that people from all backgrounds and economic levels will have access to. I commend you for your interest and commitment, and I think this committee is equally committed to finding a way to ensure diversity in the listeners and the connectedness and the business that is part of it. Whenever I travel around, I'm constantly hearing, how can I be engaged in the business part of communications? How can I have a voice that is profitable, but I am meaningful in terms of message. And with a little bit of humor as I close, it seems that there has been quite a bit of use of the communication tool over the last 72 hours. Enormous commentary, this new tool called Twitter and Tweet. I used to think Tweet was the little stories I tell my children, but we're tweeting and there are Twitters. So we know that there is a open field for words that are not helpful and are hurtful. It is so very important for that diverse voice that comes from minority communities that hopefully can be strong and powerful as we grow this great nation. And that has to be on the business side and the production side and the listening side. So my best wishes to all of you, and count both the CBC, Chair is Chairman Richmond, and the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, the policy in. I hope my board member will not think that I am putting the board too far into policy, but they have given a great resounding yes that we have policy aspects of the foundation board where we can collaborate on those issues. So again, we gave you this beautiful weather in September. Enjoy it if you're from out of town. And I end on my personal acknowledgement of my constituents and those in Puerto Rico, Louisiana, Florida, and the Virgin Islands, that we are still suffering from the hurricanes and lost power, lost communication. It makes this meeting that much more important, because what you do, even as you talk about diversity, can save lives. And I thank you all so very much for all that you've done. Thank you.
Thank you for your service, your interest, your commitment, and partnership. I can tell you one thing about this group: we are action-oriented, and so we will be here to deliver the kinds of things for the citizens of the United States that you have just articulated. So thank you for your commitment.
Let me just leave this here. Okay. And I leave you in good hands, Madam Board Member. I know that you will represent in so many wonderful ways with your great talent. Just so proud of your service. Thank you, Janice, very much. So proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will turn our attention to the FACA overview. I believe Paula is going to lead that discussion.
Thanks very much. Thanks for inviting me. So I'm not exactly the gatekeeper, but I feel confident after everything I've heard that all of you are going to come up with some good creative ideas. Creativity is welcome. Some of the ideas will be ideas you can agree on in a consensus manner. There may be other ideas that are not 100% consensus, but the goal is to have all of those ideas heard and shared. The other goal is for those ideas to get to the commission and hopefully be in some actionable form, and some of the ideas presumably might be adopted or go into an NPRM. So my role is to sort of give you an overview of the FACA so that if the commission adopts your ideas or is considering them, they can move forward and not be tripped up by the objection that the process of the FACA was flawed and therefore the commission would be sort of barred from relying on your recommendations or reports. That happens very rarely, but it has happened in cases where commissions or agencies have moved forward with recommendations of advisory groups, and because there was a technical flaw, the meetings weren't open, or there wasn't sufficient advance notice of the meetings, or other matters like that. Occasionally courts say, sorry, you got to start over, and we won't listen to what's said. So that's the only purpose for my being here, is to facilitate your ideas moving forward. So just as background, and many of you know this, several of the guiding principles under FACA are openness in government, diversity and balance in membership, and public accountability. And to reach those goals, VACA requires timely notice, 15 calendar days in the Federal Register. And we religiously do that. The public is allowed to attend all of the meetings of the full committee, but the meetings of the working groups can be held in private. So there are two different sets of guidelines. I don't think you'll be running into this with this group, but under limited circumstances, all of the meetings or part of the meetings can be closed if there are matters of national security, trade secrets, issues related to foreign policy. Doesn't seem that you'll run into that here. But if there's anything that you folks are going to discuss and you know you're going to be discussing at you'd like to discuss at this meeting that you feel are confidential, please give a heads up to Jamila or Brenda, contact them, and there's a process that VACA sets up for the chairman to be able to close the meetings. But you can't just do it on the day of the meeting. It takes a little bit of lead time, a week or two. Again, documents are available. You can access all documents. Usually they're posted on the website. If not, if there's a document you want that's been discussed at the meetings and for some reason it didn't get onto the website, please contact your DFO, Jamila or Brenda, and we'll make sure that those get posted or can be, if there's some problem with the posting, or can be made available to you. But all the major documents plus the transcripts of the meetings are available to all the members and to members of the public. And that's an important requirement in VACA. It's also very useful. Along those lines, if you feel that something you're going to be submitting, either at a working group or before the full committee to support a position you have, if you feel that that's confidential, maybe it's, employment statistics or anything along those lines that you're concerned really shouldn't be made available to the world, again, please contact your DFO. We can make arrangements for sharing agreements of confidential materials among members of the full group or among the working group. We can handle it, but you need advance notice. Once you've taken something and made it public by producing it at the full meeting, it's public and, sort of the cat's out of the bag. So, that's just something to keep in mind. As you know, your committee chairs and vice chairs are important people for this group. They serve as the focal point for members. You'll work with them to establish your working groups. If you have suggestions for the meeting agendas or for working group agendas, you should steer those both through your chair or your vice chair and through the FCC staff. The role of your FCC staff, your designated federal officer, is to call the meetings, to review and approve the agendas. That does go through us just to make sure everything is, moving along and it's on point. To chair and close the meetings if needed, to maintain all committee records, and as I said, most things will be right on the website and very handy to you. If you notice something that's not on there that should be there, that maybe got lost in the shuffle, let our folks know. And also, we will take minutes of meetings, sometimes done through court transcripts, sometimes done through videotapes. Informal working groups or subcommittees are where just a lot of the work gets done because that's where the information is gathered. And your working groups are typically not open to the public, and they're not considered to be the same as the meetings we have here, mainly because the working groups, you gather the information, you meet informally, you develop working plans, you come up with ideas, you hash out ideas, you might draft a report. And so it's just, you are allowed, if you want to have people come into the working groups to give extra input, some special experts. So if you as a member know someone that you think is fabulous and can really get to the heart of an idea and is not on the working group, talk to the chair of the working group. You can have that person come in for one meeting and speak to specific issues. It's important that the working groups, because they're closed, not function like the parent groups. So what I mean by this is the working groups will come up with ideas, do some research, but then whatever ideas you come up with, whatever recommendations at the working group level, often it's put in writing and it moves forward as a formal recommendation to all of you here as part of the parent group. And the working group recommendations are just that. They're ideas. They get presented to all of you in the parent committee, and you'll need to deliberate on them. And it's important to evaluate them fully because you want to avoid a rubber stamp. Because if everything from the working group just came up and it was approved without any discussion, then the working group would have really become the operational advisory committee. But the working groups, because they tend to meet in private, then you'd have a FACA violation. So that's why it's really important that everything from the working group be brought forward with all the information that all of you need here at your parent committee to make, have good debate and make reasoned decisions. The other thing I want to mention that sometimes gets confusing is that every now and then working groups want to conduct formal surveys, and that's not a very good idea. It's not a good idea because, in a sense, all of you in the working group represent the agency, and agencies can't do surveys without going through the getting PRA authorization from OMB. So please, no surveys. If you feel the need to get some additional information, and this often is the case from outside people, let your DFO know. And what we sometimes can do is put out not a survey, but almost like a notice of inquiry or a general posting on the website saying, for example, you're interested in finding out from, cities and towns, their experiences with X, Y, and Z. Or you're interested in hearing from certain companies, certain communications companies or broadcast companies, what their experience is with, fill in the blank. And that's fine to do, not in a survey form, but as a sort of general inquiry notice. But before you do that, work with your DFO, give them a heads up, and I would just help run it by our PRA experts in the General Counsel's office to make sure that the general inquiry has not, by accident, slipped into being a survey. A lot of times you don't need that because, especially in a group like this, you probably have so much experience and expertise among the membership, you might not need to do that outreach. But you can if you want. Just another note is that which is something that we'll monitor, but the number of members of the parent group who serve as members on the working groups have to be less than a quorum of all of you sitting here. So if you're 25, I don't know what you are, let's say you're 25 people, we would not want to have more than 12 of you on any particular working group. And the reason is, again, keeping the differential between a working group and the parent. And obviously, if you have so many people on the working group that it becomes a de facto advisory group every time you meet, then we have the potential for rule violations. And as someone has mentioned, it is possible to add people to working groups who are not already, as subject experts who are not already members of the full advisory group. That's permissible. We do it sometimes. It depends, on the circumstances. Just one or two other things. Application of ex parte rules. There are often cases where during your 2-year term, there'll be an NPRM that comes up that touches on some of the things that you folks might be considering now. So what we've developed in the past couple of years is a form of waiver and sort of a special procedure, so that if you're talking about things that are the subject of a pending proceeding, and there happen to be staff for that proceeding or decision makers, commissioners, whatever, in the room when you're having your discussions, so that in the near term you don't have to worry about filing an ex parte. So what we will probably do for this group, I don't think there are any pending proceedings now, but we're sort of starting to do this routinely, is to issue a notice of waiver that says that if your presentations are made about something that's pending and it's made to decision makers, you don't have to immediately file an ex parte notice, but we will provide that down the road, if the decision makers are going to rely on that presentation, whether it's a report or a verbal statement, that someone from our agency will put that information in the relevant docket. So we're trying to just make your life a little bit easier on that front. And the final thing, something that's come up from time to time, might not come out here, is occasionally people write opinion articles for newspapers or magazines, letting the world know about the work of our advisory committees or the working groups. And we would ask that, sort of before, so that is absolutely fine. First Amendment, we're cool with that. But sometimes people put in their own view of what should happen, and it's not clear from what they write that it's their individual view as opposed to something that's been voted on by a working group or by the parent committee. And so once or twice in the past 10 years, people have sort of said, we think we will do X, and then X didn't happen, and in fact, X wasn't what the majority of people even wanted to do. So we would just say, if you're writing about something that's happening, that's fine, but you should make clear when you sort of sign it or present it that it's your individual opinion. So if, like, the chair of a working group or the chair of the full group, puts in a presentation someplace to say, here's what we're working on and here's what I think will happen or here's what I think should happen, that it's clear that it's the individual view and opinion of the person that wrote it and not a formal statement of the full group, except in those cases where maybe you voted something and you want to have people understand what you voted. That's a different story. So if you're doing something like that, this is just a request, but if you could let staff be aware that there is that kind of article or whatever that you're working on, that we would just review it to make sure that it's totally clear that things are your individual opinion, which is like fine. And I think that's about all I have. Does anyone have any questions about procedures or anything like that?
Will somebody from the General Counsel's office sit with this, work with this, or are we going to have to affirmatively reach out to consult given these questions? Yeah, I don't know if that's for you or.
Well, we don't the staff from OGC would not typically be at the working group meetings or the full committee. I mean, I like being here, but or the full committee meetings on a routine basis. But our DFO, Jamila, and our deputy DFO would typically be at either on the phone or in person at all of your working group meetings, and obviously at all your full committee meetings. So
to flag things
for you.
Yes.
But of course, if you guys have any questions before the meeting about procedures or how to handle things, just contact them. And, if it's a sort of legal question, whatever, if I can provide some guidance, they'll be in touch with me. We coordinate. So you should be fine.
Any other questions of Paula?
I have one question. You said no more than 12 on the working group.
Oh, that was just an example. No more than
Okay.
Something less than a quorum.
Okay, because I was going to ask if you add someone additional to the working group from the outside, would it count towards that? So that's
No,
okay.
and that would be fine. It's just, so when I'm saying less than a quorum, would be just less than a quorum of the people who are members of the full group, but you can add additional people, from the outside without affecting that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Yes.
Chairman Pai, that some of the other people who applied to be on this committee would probably be asked to be on subcommittees. I thought I heard that.
The process is still, under review. Okay. And some of the applicants were, in fact, subject matter experts and interested parties. So that would definitely be a pool from which the chairman might select. But they can also go outside of that as well. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you for the information. It's very helpful. Is there anything to keep in mind as individuals or organizations here would submit comments on an NPRM or anything of that nature with regard to our participation on the committee, or is it just completely independent?
That would be independent. So exactly. So if your organization has certain views on something that's in a pending proceeding, that's fine. There's no constraints. There are no shackles caused by your participating here. That's fine.
Excellent questions. Any further questions? Any questions from our folks participating by phone? Seeing none. Thank you, Paula.
Okay,
excellent
thanks very
presentation.
much. Good
Quite
luck.
helpful. Mm-hmm. And next, I will turn it back over to Jamila and Brenda to go through kind of some overview and questions and answers.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you, Paula, very much. We're gonna be very brief because Paula really did do an excellent job, but just to clarify a few things, particularly for folks for whom this is your first participation. The Advisory Committee on Diversity and Digital Empowerment is a federal advisory committee chartered under the Federal Advisory Committee Act. Our establishment date is July 5th, 2017, and we're chartered through July 5th, 2019. And we can, if the chairman so chooses, seek to recharter at the end of that 2-year period. The mission of this committee is to make recommendations to the Commission on how to empower disadvantaged communities and accelerate the entry of small businesses, including those owned by women and minorities, into the media, digital news, video, audio, programming industries, including as owners, suppliers, and employees. The committee's mission is also to provide recommendations to the Commission on how to ensure that disadvantaged communities are not denied the wide range of opportunities made possible by next-generation networks. Members of this committee have been appointed by the FCC chairman to balance the expertise and viewpoints that are necessary to effectively address the issues to be considered by the committee. As a result, this committee reflects a wide variety of interests, including those of minorities and women, consumers, civil rights groups, public interest groups, and industry. And members should be prepared to serve a 2-year term and to participate regularly in the deliberations of at least one subcommittee or one working group. The advisory committee may, with the approval of the FCC, work through informal subcommittees or other subgroups, as Paula explained. These smaller groups will report their activities to the committee as a whole. It is expected that the work of the subcommittees will be conducted primarily through telephone calls and email correspondence. Public notice of these committee meetings is not required. Working groups may invite speakers, presenters to their meetings. You may collect publicly available data. You may develop reports, including best practice reports, and you may, as a working group, file comments in FCC docketed proceedings. The recommendations of the subcommittees must be reported to the committee as a whole, and only as modified or ratified by the committee as a whole may these recommendations then be reported to the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission. The working groups are critically important to the success of this committee. Each working group should plan to meet frequently. Once a week or once every 2 weeks is recommended. Committee members will be assigned to 1 or 2 working groups in order to balance expertise. Each working group will include committee members as well as other individuals who may have applied to serve on the committee or other individuals with unique experience and expertise. And as with committee members, they must be vetted by our Office of General Counsel for ethics and other clearance concerns. Now I'll turn it over to Brenda, and she'll have additional discussion of the working groups.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamila. The advisory committee will have 3 working groups, and I will describe them in a little bit of detail now. The first working group, which is a broadcast diversity and development group, will recommend solutions, including an incubator program, to encourage management and ownership of broadcast properties by a diverse range of voices, including minorities and women. And second, study successful approaches to fostering diversity in ownership and management, as well as supplier diversity in broadcast-related procurement. Henry Rivera, Senior Advisor of the Emma Bowen Foundation, will serve as the chair of the Broadcast Diversity and Development Working Group. The second working group is the Digital Empowerment and Inclusion Group, and it will identify new approaches to expanding access to emerging technologies in underserved and underconnected communities, will provide recommendations on ways to ensure that disadvantaged communities are not denied the wide range of opportunities made possible by next-generation networks. This includes educational, economic, healthcare, and civic participation opportunities. Heather Gate, Director of Digital Inclusion at Connected Nation, will serve as the chair of the Digital Empowerment and Inclusion Working Group. Finally, the third working group, which is the diversity in the tech sector, will study the underemployment and lack of promotion opportunities for women and minorities in the tech sector and propose a range of approaches business could use to address these issues, and also highlight best practices of industry leaders, training and employment diversity in the tech field, and also develop recommendations for innovative training programs in science, technology, engineering, and math. And Mr. Mark Morial, President and CEO of National Urban League, will chair the Diversity in Tech Sector Working Group. Our committee chair, Julia Johnson, will now lead our discussion of the 3 working groups and provide additional emphasis on the timetables and goals for their work and recommendations.
What Diane and I thought we would do now is open this up to the chairs of the working groups to lead in the discussion around, but first just framing out the areas of focus and candidly opening it up to a discussion based upon their initial comments from those that are interested or may need clarifications on issues. Henry Rivera was unable to join us today, so Diane is going to pinch hit there to kind of open up the discussion around that working group, and David Honig will pinch hit second because he's also spoken with Henry Rivera. So with that.
Thank you.
I think we've heard from the chairman, and we've also heard in some of our discussion already, that clearly one of the things that was from a previous working group and a previous committee was the incubator program, and that is something that we have had some discussion around, but I think this is an opportunity for us to look at what does that mean, how would it be implemented, how would that work in both radio and TV, and what might we do to be able to make that something that could be implemented in the near future, working with the commission. So that certainly is a priority and focus for this group, and it's also taking a look at perhaps some best practices, what's happened so far in the industry in the 4 years intervening from our previous working as a group, and are there things that we're seeing that, due to the industry changes, means we have to be thinking about what does that really mean, what does that look like. Taking a look at the commission's work as it goes toward license renewals, and what are the rules for diversity? Are they still working? Is there a way to make them be more effective, more efficient? And what has been the result of where we've been? But again, our focus on where we're going. And how do we take where the industry is going in broadcast and make sure that we are addressing the needs of the industry, as well as making sure that we're handling diversity in a way that allows us to see some measurable results. So I think that's an overview for it. David, anything you'd like to add to that?
Sure, and this really, okay. I'll share with you the conversations that Henry and I have had about this working group and how it looks at some of the regulatory impediments to particularly minority ownership, as the previous working groups on this subject have looked at that issue, particularly with respect to advertising discrimination. Minority owners got in late, as we know, about 50 years after other owners got in. And one textbook example of how regulatory barriers inhibit new entry is a proceeding that's going to be probably wrapped up at the Commission in about a month on main studio rules. If you have to have a main studio for your station, but you can't but you didn't get a license for the large city, others got 5-6 licenses to the large city, they can use the same main studio. But if you have to serve the market with 6 different stations, each of which is in a different suburb, you've got 6 main studios, and that's a cost imposed on you because of 50 years of exclusion. So the Commission is considering eliminating the rule in great measure because of the effect that that's had as basically a tax on segregation. That's an issue that the chairman kind of understands because of its impact, and also because of the impact on the industry as a whole. But there are other issues that the chairman has spoken with former Commissioner Rivera about, and that he's energized about, that may also relate to kind of what's happened to minority broadcasters, and are they being held back by rules? The inability to move your transmitter into closer to where the audience is, into large cities, because even if there are no technical impediments to it, the so-called rural radio rules. What to do with FM translators if you have an AM station that gets an FM translator, but then you can't use it for a different program stream. That's come up in the modernization proceeding. And being able to look at those things holistically and in terms of their effects, their unintended effects, is just a perfect use of the time of those who can step back from it a little bit and study it in the context of a working group, is one thing that I know Henry would like us to do. The incubator proposal was one that was made in 1990 in a previous advisory committee that Zora Brown and I co-chaired under Chairman Sykes, and Jim Winston was a member. He proposed it then, 27 years ago? It's been through 7 dockets, and now here it is. It may have its chance to go across the finish line. That would be huge if it does. So that's another big proposal that the chairman, again, hopes we could make happen. So those are just illustrations, but they're just by way of example. There are many other ideas that could come from the primordial soup of good thinkers with creativity and background and expertise in the room. That's what a good working group can do.
We'll open it up to questions, thoughts around that committee work. Any other questions or thought? Yes, Sherman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. With respect to the Incubated Minority Ownership Initiative, given the fact that we have a 2-year window, and 2 years may sound like a lot of time, but it really isn't. But there are two very important parts of when you talk about an incubated ownership initiative. Number one, you're talking about the larger broadcasters, i.e. the CBSs, the iHearts, and the others, and you're talking about sometimes individual entrepreneurs or growing broadcasters in terms of creating strategic alliances and partnerships between those two. I think those are the foundations of an incubated minority or an incubated ownership initiative. So my thought, Madam Chairman, and also to the chair of the broadcast initiative, is that there has to be dialogue immediately with the leading both the leading broadcasters, some of the larger broadcasters, i.e., like I said, the CBSs, the iHearts, and the others, but also tapping resources like a NABOB or MMTC who also have working knowledge of who are those individual owner operators or growing ones that certainly represent an opportunity to grow. One of my own observations in seeing what happened with as an entity like I've certainly admired what Comcast, NBC Universal did in as it moved forward with the approval of it, and how Comcast and NBC Universal made an initiative to help create some more minority owner operators in that space. But my hope is that this time, as we are looking to create an incubated minority ownership initiative, is that where we're actually identifying more of those real entrepreneurs out there who have been laboring in whether it's broadcast radio, broadcast television, to be aligned with potentially a CBS radio or a CBS television. And because what's been interesting for me is that over the past couple of years, I've had an opportunity to meet a number of them, and their frustration is that, hey, I'm here, and what their frustration is that what's impeding their growth are two things: access to capital and access to deal flow. And if we're going to take this initiative in terms of creating an incubated minority ownership initiative, what I would say again, there has to be dialogue immediately with players like, again, the CBSs, the iHearts, and others, but also as we in having discussions with the MMTCs and the NABOBs about who those players are that would be good fits around how we create strategic alliance and partnerships in that area. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Excellent. Any final comments there, Brent?
I have a question about the scope of the committee in terms of, is it just broadcast, or would something like Comcast said with the El Rey channel, would that be within the purview of the committee as well?
I think the initial focus of Chairman Pai is for broadcast, but I would not necessarily want to limit the group to that. So I would suggest that if there is synergy around discussing other things, or if you come up with what you think are viable solutions for broadcast and you think they can be applied across industry lines, you can certainly make a recommendation for that. But I know for incubation purposes, his focus is on broadcasting.
Final question? Seeing none, we will go to our next group, Heather Gate.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Okay, so the Digital Empowerment and Inclusion group will be working towards identifying new approaches to connecting vulnerable populations and ways of ensuring disadvantaged communities are not deprived of access to next-gen networks. So in my experience in working in digital inclusion, we are at our strongest when we listen to each other and we create public-private partnerships. So it's very important that everybody be included in that discussion, whether it's dealing with working with nonprofits and organizations and communities that are working to make sure people are connected, but also listening to industry experts to make sure that there's some synergy and everybody is working towards achieving the same goal of connecting communities. So that being said, in addressing issues related to digital inclusion, we like to organize everything that we do in three broad categories. The first one is access. And obviously, that's the foundation of inclusion. Without the networks, people cannot get included. So we are going to have a discussion on the challenges or the barriers connectivity related to inadequate networks in rural and urban areas, underserved and disadvantaged, underserved and unserved communities. And then also the role of low-cost or affordable broadband programs that we currently have. And then we also want to talk about the role of government on the infrastructure part of things. The next thing is adoption. Adoption is related to making sure that people have the skills they need to actually use the next-gen networks, and that entails what's available electronically and what are the organizations doing in the communities to make sure people have these skills, and what are the skills that we're talking about when we say basic skills. And then the use part of it is related to meaningful use, how people in those communities are meaningfully engaging with the different sectors that serve them, whether it's education. We talk about the challenge with schools trying to do one-to-one initiatives or broadband initiatives, but the biggest challenge for them is, how can I give a child homework when they don't have connectivity at home? So how do we address those kind of issues? We're dealing with small businesses. How are small businesses engaging with vulnerable communities? So the idea of use is very broad. It's related to the application of it. And that is something that I would open up for discussion so we can specifically target, because that can be a very broad scope when you talk about use. I would suggest we select 3 or 4 and be very specific about those, but that's also subject to description. But for now, yes, the way that I think, I have to think in those 3 categories, and I would like to have subject matter experts in each one of those categories to adequately have that discussion. So I open up to some early comments on that.
Any comments or questions? Yes, Mr. Lopez?
Thank you. So this occurred to me while you were talking, Heather, but I think it might apply to all the working groups and then to the committee in general. There seems to be some subject areas where obviously a lot of things are under the FCC purview, but also some other issues that may require at some point congressional action. Is that something that we're prepared to do in addition to recommending stuff to the FCC, to be able to say, hey, this is an area where XYZ steps we think could be taken, however, that is it falls under congressional authority, so we can recommend to Congress what those things are. Mm-hmm. So I just to chairs or the chair of the working groups or whoever.
Yes, you can certainly make a recommendation that you believe is within the purview of the Congress. We have an Office of Legislative Affairs, and I think it's either every 2 years or every 3 years, they put together a report, and they send it over to Congress, and it includes recommendations from the FCC on a range of things, but mostly about how to eliminate market entry barriers for minority and female entrepreneurs. And so if you have some recommendations for Congress, you can certainly send them up through the full committee, and if they're adopted, the chairwoman can send them on to the FCC chairman, and he doesn't have to necessarily wait for an issuance of this Section 257 report. He can send it on to Congress at his discretion.
So it would be the chairman and not necessarily this committee or any working group that would communicate with Congress. Here are some recommendations.
No, the working group would not communicate with Congress. No.
But it could be a recommendation of the
Absolutely.
full committee.
It must flow up through the
course.
full committee. But you are allowed to make recommendations that are legislative in nature, and then you could come to this full panel meeting and discuss it. And then if there's some voting to change the wording here or there, but it's ultimately adopted, then it's a recommendation of the full committee, and then Julia would be sending it forward to the FCC chairman. And then if he chooses to take the recommendation of the committee, then he would forward that on to Congress as his recommendation that they do the thing that you all, the experts, suggest that they do.
A great example of that was Commissioner Clyburn. The number 5 item on her top 5 things she would like to see happen is the reintroduction of the tax certificate. So that is clearly a legislative matter that could only be handled through Congress. So she specifically identified that as something she would consider an important byproduct.
And as a matter of fact, that is a recommendation from a previous iteration of this committee that was adopted by an FCC chairman and was included in a report that went to Congress. Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments for Heather or for this subcommittee? Seeing none, turn it over to Marielle.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And in the interest of time, it's exactly 1:01. I want to just thank the chairman for the responsibility of trying to shape out what this working group is all about. So tech can be broadly defined. I mean, every company today is a tech company, in truth and in fact, because they're utilizing technology to do their business. And understanding that's not the scope of this, I would say this in terms of this whole jurisdictional question. While there may be an assertion that, quote unquote, some certain types of technology companies are not subject to the jurisdiction of this commission, they are interdependent and inextricably linked to those that are regulated by this commission. For example, what would an airplane be without an airport? Or a shipping line be without a port? Or a train be without tracks? Many of these sort of new age technology companies are dependent on the very networks that this commission and the private sector regulated by the commission are in the business of building, improving, expanding, and visioning. So it's easy to separate, but in reality, you cannot really separate. There is an interdependence which is very important. Number 2, I am proud that the National Urban League was part of and instrumental in the original Comcast Memorandum of Understanding that has led to, and many of you are involved in that process, important, if you will, progress along diversity. I might add, that agreement was a voluntary agreement between Comcast and multiple civil rights organizations that was recognized by this commission in its order approving that transaction. Ditto for 2 other, if you will, voluntary agreements that we've been involved in. One with AT&T
related to their purchase of DirecTV. And number 3, the recent transaction through which Charter purchased Time Warner Cable. Voluntary transactions through which these companies have made written commitments to diversity. I think the challenge in this is, what is the bully pulpit of this commission, the chairman and its leaders, in pushing diversity in ownership, in jobs, in access, going into the future? And I think that what this working group will certainly need to do is get its arms around the current state of play of diversity broadly defined, best practices around how to enhance diversity, and also public policy steps that can be taken either by the Commission or by the Commission with recommendations to the Congress of the United States. This is a very important issue, and I'm really pleased and looking forward. So I hope several of you will volunteer to work on this working group as we think about how to push this very significant and important issue forward in this nation. I just meet so many young people from communities of color who are talented, who are smart, who have great ideas, who I know deserve the opportunity to have access to this growing sector of the American economy. And that's what this is about. This is about enhancement of the future and building bridges to opportunity for young people. There's another Mark Zuckerberg out there, may not look like or have a name that sounds like Mark Zuckerberg, but there's another one out there, and he may be from Detroit or Los Angeles, right, or Newark, or the south side of Chicago. We've got to build those bridges to opportunities, and we've got to push forward like pioneers did many, many years ago with television and radio licenses, with the relationships with the historic telcos, how they pushed years ago for diversity. We've got to push on this new frontier, on this new front. So I'm pleased to be able to be a part of this, and certainly thank you, and apologize for having to excuse myself. I got to catch a train.
We appreciate your comments, and you've started a dialogue. There's several questions. You are my leader, so I appreciate everything you're doing and the contributions you're bringing to this committee. Janice?
And Mr. Mark Morial, thank you so much for your comments. They certainly fuel us for where we're going, and I can attest to the work that you and the Urban League are doing for communities, and the presence of the Urban League is really vital here. I'd like to bring 3 points forward that have intermittently been hit upon. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Officer Johnson, for this opportunity. The first thing that I want to bring forward is that coming circular to where the Chairman Pai actually opened this up this morning. He spoke to this being a gateway opportunity, and that gate, I would remind us, swings both ways. Oftentimes we think of gateway as an entry point for the underserved or the unserved. Truly, it is an entry point for the larger community to benefit from that very population. And I have witnessed that in every instance of industry, whether it be employment or employer, that I have seen. Some of the talent and some of the national security opportunity we will have won't simply come from larger cities. They'll come from rural and Rust Belt districts as well. And we want to be thoughtful of that as we build forward, particularly with Heather's committee. There's so much opportunity that is rotting on the vine. And we know when we're green, we grow. When we're ripe, we rot. The second point I want to bring forward is that point of national risk. It truly is an opportunity for national security at its strongest level that we give that strong attention to where we are working on this committee. And I believe that when Officer Johnson, you stated there's the opportunity toward legislative recommendation, we might be purposefully mindful, not simply invited, to look where we can address this. History is happening so much faster today, but oftentimes the byproduct of that is that legislation and process follow the occurrence. we have an opportunity to switch that around. And that last point that I want to make before I too catch my flight back to California is a country is as strong as its communities are. First generation businesses often dynamically impact the power of a family. It is second and multi-generational businesses that bring the best benefit to communities. We are doing economic and health service to make sure that we no longer live in a disconnected community around how we thrive. Therefore, we have not the ability to allow any person in any community to be disconnected to the best vehicles by which we conduct our lives and our business. It is an honor to serve on this committee, and however I may bring value, I'm happy to do. I'm from a rural community in North Carolina. We tend to say you're in high cotton when you're around folk like this. I'd like to think that, speaking as a techie, I'm in the company of some of the most magnificently mature millennials I've ever met. And I am truly honored to work to help service that these folks get an opportunity to bring the value to this country. I thank you and Chairman Pai for the vision to create an opportunity and platform for that. Last thing, this world is fueled by total talent communities. We must work it from the business and the employment sector. We must not forget the American worker's ability. Most people grow careers from starting jobs. So I rally that we continue to think that on each of our committees. And thank you very much.
Thank you for those wonderful comments. Any other comments or questions? We've got, let me just, we are running a little late, which is fine. We're going to take these comments, and we also wanted to make sure that we have the last several minutes for public comment. So we'll continue with our discussion.
And I'll be very quick, Nicole Turner-Lee. I think all the working groups, Chairwoman, actually sound very exciting and promising. And I think I want to echo two things just rather quickly. One, what Mark Morial mentioned in terms of despite the fact that the FCC only has authority over regulated industries, that we continue to keep the conversation of the ecology and the context in which we are in. Digital ecosystem is changing. And it is no longer just a discussion about traditional technology, but the other drivers of new technology that are forcing efficiencies. So it's important for us in any conversation we have, from the conversation about the incubator to digital inclusion to diversity in tech, that we look at all of the layers of how the general context of technology is really just, we are no longer hailing a cab. We are ordering it on our smartphones. We are no longer, picking up our groceries at a grocery store. We are ordering it online. And those are new dynamics of the digital divide that we have to all keep in mind, or else we will create outdated solutions to a newly innovated economy. And then I'd like to bring up one other point that I think is important as a researcher. As we approach our committees, I just would like to recommend, and this is something from my experience of serving before, this committee is so empowered to make change. And so we also have to be mindful that we are not starting with a deficit-driven understanding of these communities. We use the labels of disadvantage, but the reality of it is that social media, for example, is driven by consumers of color. What we are seeing in terms of uptake with various technology tools are being driven by consumers of color. So it's very important for us to not replicate the types of stereotypical legacies that come with people being behind the line. I would argue that people are probably not as close to the finish line or the starting line, but they're right about there. That pinky or that toe is over the line. And so I would just urge all of us, as we have our discussions, to change the face of participation for the communities in which we serve, and to think of it as where are the opportunities, right, that we have to ensure that they have the best realization of the benefits of this ecosystem, and not necessarily frame it from where they have to come to get to a point of equity. We're getting close, but that will drive our solutions. I wanted to put that out there because I've heard us talk about that in terms, I know how the committee was chartered, but I don't want us to think that we start from the starting place of disadvantage, because that's not always the case with many of the people that are adopting technology, and many of us in here as well.
Excellent point. Thank you. Chris?
I promise I will be brief. One, I want to echo and say that I completely agree with Mark Morial, Jamise, and Nicole Turner-Lee on all the points made. Also, I think it's important. I come from a rural community. I'm also a foster parent and have gone through the foster system very carefully. And so looking at that perspective and looking at, and really what I'm thinking about is I heard Silicon Valley mentioned, but I know that there are many hubs in this country that are creating technology opportunities and becoming the second Silicon Valley or the third or the fourth. And so I want to make sure that from a geographic perspective, we are looking at the tech sector overall and making sure that we're providing solutions that not are just in our largest communities or largest tech sectors, but also our most rural, because that is where we could get the next Mark Zuckerberg that doesn't have the name or look like Mark Zuckerberg.
Excellent point. Kathleen?
The only other sentences that I want to add is we should be incredibly impatient. We should assume we don't have a lot of time. Every month, every day that you don't have access to internet or you don't have the tools to leverage the knowledge of the internet is harmful. So impatience is important for what we're doing.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes.
Actually, I had a question. A lot of these groups are going to touch upon topics that are going to be intersectional in their outlook. How do you propose these working groups work with each other on topics that would be of interest to two or more working groups? For example, diversity in tech also closely ties into the digital inclusion working group. Do you prefer members work together, or how do you envision this?
So I will say this, and maybe this answers your question. If not, we can expound upon it. One of the things that we're hopeful is that each of the groups will develop what we were calling work plans, that we dig deeply, as you've suggested, and that we do that in a very deliberate way to prioritize issues and prioritize actionables. The working groups, if you look at, would provide final work plans December 15th, and these dates will be provided to you and floated around. But prior to that, the working groups would meet, as she suggested, once or twice a week. But most importantly, every month, the chairs would have a meeting by phone with the chairs of the full committee, so that we can kind of interplay and see where we were all headed to figure out how we match up ideas, concepts, programs, and initiatives. So about every 30 days, we are looking at October 25th as the first meeting. I think the second meeting, now that my phone battery's dying, about 30 days later, feeding into a final action plan, with most of the core activities taking place at our meeting first quarter of 2018. But we don't want to miss a beat, and we want to have those groups working independently and then together. Also, one of the things that Chairman Pai said is he doesn't want us to work in a silo, that there are other FACAs. We have to look at what the Broadband Deployment Advisory FACA is doing. Heather, I know some of their initiatives will be key to the work that you're doing. So finding ways to kind of make sure that we're understanding what the other FACAs are doing and where we can feed in and where the activities are complementary, or if there are frictions, that we bring those up. And we'll get you those dates.
No worries. Thank you.
Javier?
Thank you, Madam
And then
Chair.
Marita.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As an association that represents job creators and minority-owned companies of all sizes, I want to ensure that as we develop the technologies, the ideas, the concepts that will drive technology moving forward in this country, that we don't forget that after the deliberation, after the development of the policy, the real work begins. The installation, the development, the maintenance of the technology, the infrastructure. And I want to ensure that minority-owned firms of all kinds, women-owned firms, are given the opportunity to maintain the infrastructure and ensure that these minority-owned companies which are representative of the very communities we want to protect, are offered an opportunity to participate as well. We have large corporations around the room here, like Verizon and Comcast, that have done admirable work in terms of allowing minority-owned and women-owned companies to participate. But as we develop our own strategies and our own recommendations, I hope we will keep the needs of minority-owned firms in the center of our discussion, because after the policy is developed, the real work begins. It's building out the infrastructure, it's maintaining the technology, it's developing the technology, and I want to make sure that minority-owned firms, small businesses all over the country are kept front and center in the deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you. Marita?
Actually, I wanted to piggyback on what Javier just said. I just came back from expatriates, they call it expatriates, event in Detroit, where about 200 former Detroiters were invited back to provide information on how to, rebuild the infrastructure and how to make sure there's inclusiveness. And there were in a, star-studded event with Lily Tomlin and Mary Wilson of the Supremes and Steve Ballmer, all from Detroit. There were protesters outside, and one of the things that I want to make sure that we do, we sat down in working groups with minority entrepreneurs who've been there, some for 50 years, and who stayed in the community, and just making sure that we include the input, not just include input, but take the information from the people who are in the best position. They know how to make their communities grow. They know what's needed. And so one of the entrepreneurs said, we object to your use of the term inclusiveness because we've been here, the whole time. So you're coming in and imposing something, on us and including us, and we're already here. So I just we are in the Beltway, inside the Beltway. So just want to make sure that our committee takes that into consideration, that we get the voices of the people who are really close to the solutions and the challenges.
Thank you. And to that point, we are considering, as we hold our workshops and our meetings, to have field hearings go out to the people. Chairman Pai does a wonderful job of kind of painting the pictures by telling the stories of the communities that he's visited. And in that same vein, he wants to hear exactly as you've articulated from those that are experts in those communities, what will it take to empower them? So excellent point, and that is definitely on the chairman's list and on the staff's list to make sure that that all gets integrated in. Let me go back to those dates. So the October 25th would be the first day that we would expect to have at least updates on the working plans from each of the groups. And that will be done in a collaborative way. All of at least the chairs and co-chairs, and then Diane and I will be on those calls as we ferret out these issues. The next update would be November 17th, again by call, so that we continue to massage down. And Kathleen, we will not be patient. We will move forward to have those final recommendations by December 15th. Those will be work plans. Those work plans, and by the way, if you have some that are already fully baked and that are ready for recommendations, we can talk about those along the way as well. First quarter of next year, our meeting has not been set, but that will be a roll-up-your-sleeves, actionable discussion of issues that have been percolated through these committees. So we are incredibly purposeful, and we are appreciative of the talent around the table and the commitment to getting these things done. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Brent?
Given the urgency of now, we know that hurricanes have devastated many parts of the country, but especially the Caribbean, yes, island of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. And the infrastructure there has been especially hard hit, electrical grid and the communications grid. So would it be inappropriate for the committee to recommend to the FCC that they formalize a task force to study the situation in the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico and to come up with recommendations for getting that grid back up and running again?
I'm speaking out of turn, but I think those are the kind of things that we would need to hear from the experts that are needed, so I think it would be the appropriate kind of thing for us to try to tee up. Now I can turn to Jamila and talk about platform and how we would go about that.
Well, I know we were talking about having your first working meeting, be in the first quarter of 2018, but I think I hear you saying time is of the essence for some issues. You're certainly willing, in conversations with your chair, to suggest that you have a meeting by phone, and if you want to bring up a substantive agenda and you think that there's not a resting place for your recommendation in the working groups, you can certainly take it up in an agenda of the committee of the whole. It's not ungermane to what you all are doing, what I hear you saying. So I would encourage you to chat with Julia if you think that that's something that can't wait or shouldn't wait until the first quarter of 2018. There may be a way to put you all together, and someone would have to take the pen on the recommendation and kind of work it through so that it could be discussed, and then presented and voted on and then sent to the chairman.
Thank you. Javier?
If I could just weigh in on that one issue, I agree with Mr. Wilkes that we should, while it may be a bit outside the purview of this group, we should take on the issue of Puerto Rico post haste. I would like for us to think of Puerto Rico by way of example. Imagine if the state of Georgia was completely outside of any kind of communications capability. Imagine if the state of Michigan or the state of Maine, we would be jumping through hoops to get that state up and running. This is no different. Puerto Ricans are Americans, and we need to, as a committee, take the opportunity to lead. We didn't ask for this circumstance, but it is upon us, and that's when leadership really counts. And I hope that I'm surrounded by leaders that see Puerto Ricans as American citizens who need communications capabilities. We should think of them just the way we think of any other state in this nation. So I'm hopeful that we will take up that challenge because it's been presented to us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other comments? So we have a process, and we'll work with Jamila and determine how we could best get it before the full, what the recommendation might be, and getting it before the full committee. Thank you very much. Anything else? Yes.
One piece of information that would be helpful is to get a sense of what is the FCC activated internally, since the FCC has internal processes that hopefully have kicked in even before this meeting. To get a sense of where we are on that would be very helpful.
Rudy, I would agree. It feels like we probably have some work to do on our side to determine what are the next steps and what does the FCC intend to do, and determine if there's some way to feed in and be helpful in that regard. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Just to jump in on this discussion, the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, which is actually my home bureau, there will be a presentation at tomorrow's full commission, open commission meeting. It will be in this room, and I haven't seen the presentation, so I don't know the specifics of it, but there should be an update on all the efforts that have happened in the last few weeks.
Excellent.
So very timely, Brendan Javier.
Thank you. Anything else? Any other comments? Seeing none, I think we are wonderful in our substantive discussion, and as always, we have a section for public comment. Do we have anyone that would like to participate? Any public comments? Yes. We have two. Yes. We will start then, and would we have them come forward?
Let's see if I can make a place over here.
We're going to set up an area for public comment. And if you could state your name and affiliation, that would be quite helpful.
Hello, my name is Daryl Parks. I'm a civil rights lawyer from Tallahassee, Florida, with the law firm of Parks and Crump. And thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm very encouraged that Chairman Pai has decided to focus on digital redlining. It's an issue that I consider to be very critical of our times. In fact, I think it's not only a civil rights issue, but it's an economic issue for our day. I'm totally committed to fighting redlining. I see it not as just a DC political issue, but it's an issue that requires that we work with both the civil rights organizations and the public interest groups, which I'm very committed to for those who have the same common cause. As I look at this issue, digital redlining, I'm totally committed to exposing and eliminating the systematic redlining that we are seeing in areas. Probably the deepest issue about this is that you see it in urban areas that were as part of the focus that I've had up until now. As you look at this issue, though, I think that the final recommendations that you make as a committee will tell the real story. And I encourage all of you to work toward this goal, and I look forward to working with you as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Attorney Parks. We noticed that you were here for the entire meeting, so your commitment and your passion is noted, and it is certainly one of the issues, as Heather stated, that is teed up on the committee, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you, Madam. Thank you. Janelle, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm S. Janelle Trigg, and I'm a member of the law firm Lerman Center. We are a communications law boutique here in Washington, D.C. First of all, I'd like to congratulate each of you for joining this particular, I think, outstanding committee, one of the most diverse diversity committees of all time, and I think one of the most diverse advisory committees the FCC has had ever. I think that speaks volumes for Chairman Pai's commitment to diversity and inclusion. It's my pleasure to join you today. I had to be here to witness this in person. It's taken 4 long years to get this committee back up and running. And having been instrumental in the creation of the very first advisory committee, I think this committee will be outstanding and do outstanding work. I heard several instances where you mentioned the short time frame. 2 years is not a lot of time. And no, we cannot be patient, and the urgency is now. Given that, I encourage you to look at the work of the previous advisory committees. There's a lot of good work, foundational work, policy, legal analysis that will help you expedite and make your work more efficient. We have a short time to do a lot of big things. So I encourage you to look at what's been done before you. Let's not reinvent the wheel so we can still move forward. I look forward to working with you, hopefully as a subject matter expert, but I am here to listen, I'm here to learn, and I wish you the very best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Your passion and your brilliance has been a part of this process, as part of the fabric of what we do. So we appreciate, and we will certainly be partnering with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Want to go ahead?
If you could circulate the
well, there's actually a treasure trove of past work. So I would prefer that we do it on a more discrete basis. I think as you begin to form into your working groups, if there's something of interest, we can certainly cull the materials and get it to you if it's specific to something that you're working on. Otherwise, you get buried by paper from the beginning, and it's just a lot to go through. There are 40 recommendations. Many of them are built on empirical data, so you'd have to go through all of that. But we can make it available.
The media issues subcommittee,
David, we'll get to you.
The most similar to the broadcast one, for instance. I mean, I still have all of that material from the media issues subcommittee, so we can certainly take the final recommendations and some of the work that happened before, and can make the summary sheets and those kinds of things available, because they exist. But there is a volume of material.
David, would you like to contribute?
Yes.
David?
All of the work, all of the resolutions adopted by the previous advisory committee from 2004 are actually posted on the Commission's website under advisory committees, previous advisory committees. The 1990 advisory committee's work is posted under the NPRM from 1992. The 1982 advisory committee that Henry Rivera chaired is also in the FCC second posted, and the advisory committee from 1977 that gave us the tax certificate policy is in 68 FCC second, and it doesn't go before that. That was the first one. So it's all
little reading material
there.
for you.
Thank you. Dean Dates, did you have a comment?
Well, I just wonder if there's some way you could
send a link to some of us who are, trying to find this? Because I have searched on that site trying to locate, because I had heard there was material there, and it's not easily accessible for those who are neophytes that are using that particular website.
Thank you, Dean Dates. Very good point. We'll make sure we get that done. Any other final comments? No more public comment? Now, does everyone have their informational sheets completed? Because as quickly as we can get that, we're going to, work through it, figure out who wants to be on which committee so that the work of these committees can begin. So do not forget to leave that information. And if you forget to leave it, we're gonna stalk you anyway. So, yes. Okay. And if people did we want them to do special interests if they wanted to be a vice chair? No. Okay. I think that will be it. If we get that information, we'll be just fine. Any final comments? Diane, any closing words? Thank you. And then with that, I think this meeting, do I need a motion to adjourn, or am I allowed to just? This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.